with us? Guy
Yes.
Benson, are you there? Is that you, Guy Benson?
I am.
Hi, Guy Benson. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Thanks for joining us. Sorry about that. We should we practiced that in rehearsal, but it came off better in rehearsal. You are political editor of townhall.com, and you're a Fox News contributor, and the Show Me Institute is bringing you in this Wednesday, along with Mary Katharine Ham. It's going to be a discussion at the World Chess Hall of Fame on Wednesday to talk about the end of honest debate in America. What are you talking about? All we do is debate and yell back and forth with each other. What are you talking about, Guy?
Well, we do a lot of debating, if you want to call it that. Definitely a lot of shouting. We just feel like starting on college campuses and then sort of seeping into other elements of American life, we are losing our ability to actually talk to each other and solve our problems because we can't even discuss them honestly, because a lot of our debate, particularly in our view on the left, is sort of characterized by impugning motives and trying to disqualify the other side as bad people unworthy of listening to rather than engaging their ideas.
Are you saying one side's more guilty than the other?
Well, we think that both sides do this, certainly. And we get into that. We wrote a book about this a couple of years ago called End of Discussion. We have a new edition of it that came out just this past August. Both sides do it. It's a human impulse to try to shut down ideas that you don't like. We argue that the left is more at fault for this in America because they tend to dominate some of the taste-making institutions, so they have an amplification advantage, whether it's the Academy, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's much of the mainstream media. But if the shoe were on the other foot, I think we've seen plenty of evidence that the right would love to do the same thing. We argue as conservatives that we shouldn't, and that we should all try to be better across the spectrum. And that's the message that we've been bringing across the country to a number of college campuses and to a bunch of readers of End of Discussion.
Maybe 20 years ago, you might have had an argument that conservatives didn't have the outlets, right? That's why the National Review was started and other publications to, quote unquote, balance the playing field. But today, for every conservative outlet, you can have a liberal outlet and vice versa. So what is it about today that you think the liberals have a bigger mouthpiece?
Well, I mean, first of all, if you look at higher education, there's no parity whatsoever. The left dominates academia, and that's, I think, indisputable. People on the left would concede that point. Same with culture, popular culture. That's not to say that there are no conservative colleges or no actors or producers who lean right, but overall, those are major taste-making institutions, cultural institutions in America that lean heavily to the left. As for the media, I still think that, yes, you have a lot of talk radio. Yes, you have National Review and the Weekly Standard and, a number of different outlets. I'm at Fox News. A lot of people make the argument that, we are a right-leaning media organization, but that's still sort of the counter media as opposed to most of the mainstream media, which is the major networks, perhaps Fox excluded, the major newspapers, the Times, the Post, and if you look at journalism students and journalists around the country, these are people who, particularly on social issues and other things, do lean to the left and have certain biases, and that's only part of our argument, though. We think that the left, and it does start on campus. I think you guys have seen some of this go on. Some of the excesses get particularly cartoonishly bad in your state a couple years ago. These are the next generation of Americans being inculcated in this mentality that you don't necessarily disagree with someone and try to understand where they're coming from and maybe come to some sort of accommodation or compromise or at least empathy. The argument is ideas that make you uncomfortable are actually dangerous for the country, that are advanced by bad people who need to be punished. And this is not just political correctness, it's weaponized political correctness, where people need to be punished for what they believe, hounded out of their jobs in some cases, re-educated, made to think and speak differently. And we don't think that that's a strong path to the country being able to come together and solve some of the challenges that we face, because you can't solve problems that you cannot honestly discuss.
Guy Benson with us for a couple more minutes. Mary Katharine Ham, it's going to be an event at the Chess Hall of Fame there in the Central West End Wednesday, 5:30 reception, 6 p.m. Talk. We can get tickets. Where can we get tickets? Right there. I'm sure there's a website, showmeinstitute.org. I'm sure you can get tickets. All right, so I agree with you, Guy, to some extent, and that is, as somebody who fosters debate, argues in the political realm of different ideas, trying to create a space so that people have open and honest discussion. What kills me is, and first of all, I don't think one is more guilty than the other. I don't think you can be that broad, because for every example I can show you another example in 6 1/2 dozen. But what kills me about debate is you'll say something like, Donald Trump does X, Y, and Z. And they say, yeah, well, what about Hillary? What about Bill Clinton? Or you'll say, give me a Democratic guy. Claire McCaskill does X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but what about Jay Nixon, right? I mean, it's having a debate about an issue, and then the old, what about? Well, we weren't even talking about Bill Clinton. That was 20 years ago. Okay, we can have a discussion about that, but we're actually talking about the situation today. That's what kills me. When you can't argue the facts, or you argue the facts one way, and then the other way, what do they call that? Whataboutism, right? That whole...
Whataboutism, yeah.
I mean,
I think
that drives me crazy.
There's a line, and no, I agree, and I think in many cases it's a weak form of argument, and I think there's a line, right? Because I think somebody would say what we shouldn't do is enforce double standards, where when one side does something, it's a crisis that everyone freaks out about. When the other side does, you make excuses. And if there are pertinent examples that apply to the argument, bringing up that history or those examples as counterpoints, you can make decent arguments there. But that being said, when we are debating what Donald Trump may have done or Roy Moore may have done, talking about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton only gets you so far. Yes, it might point out some hypocrisy. Yes, there might be some tribalism at play where you're defending your side reflexively and attacking the other side reflexively, and then using the bad examples on the other side as if that somehow excuses or makes some sort of compelling argument in defense of your own side. But at some point you have to talk about the actual thing, which is the actual conduct of the person in question, without saying, well, yeah, but this person over here. So it can be useful. I think there's some utility in making sure that there are not hypocritical double standards. Fine, point taken, point made, but it's not, it doesn't prove anything.
Right.
It doesn't get to the nut of what the issue at hand is supposed to be. I disagree with you, and maybe if you come to our event on Wednesday, you can...
You're not allowed to disagree with me. It is my show. I am right all the time, Guy. I'm kidding.
Oh, that very much sounds like it. End of discussion. But I disagree with you on the point about we do think this is more of a problem on the left only because of the cultural advantage that they hold. And we don't believe for a second, and I think we've seen a fair amount of evidence of this with President Trump, if the cultural shoe were on the other foot, I think there'd be an awful lot of people on the right doing exactly the same thing. And one example that we give of that is, there was a few months ago, there was this engineer at Google who wrote an internal memo that had some politically provocative, politically challenging points about an insular culture. He raised some questions about the gender disparity among certain STEM professions. And this internal memo was made public, and he got fired for what was, you can disagree with what he said, but it was done respectfully and thoughtfully. But because he had some thought crimes, he was fired. And Mary Katharine and I and many people on the right said this is wrong. This is exactly the problem that we're talking about, getting fired for engaging even internally in speech. This is not a good thing. And we had a bunch of, our readers and our, people who follow us cheering us on. You're right. Google's wrong. This is scary what big tech is doing. They have so much influence in society. Then a few weeks later, you had NFL players, a handful of them, kneeling during the national anthem to express their political views, and you had the president say they should be fired for doing so. And the same people who were very upset with Google were like, yes, fire the players. And Mary Katharine and I were like, well, nope, this is the same thing. And we hasten to say, people are like, well, do you support kneeling during the anthem? That's so disrespectful. Like, no, it is super disrespectful, and I don't agree with it at all. I would be less likely to cheer for a player who does it. I also don't think it's a fireable offense in the United States of America. And maybe we can say we don't approve of this without wanting the person punished and taken out of their job for an expression of speech, no matter how misguided you believe that speech is.
Look, Guy, I agree with you 3 billion%. I have examples every single day of, hey, I disagree with this person. I disagree vehemently with what he said, but I champion and fight for his right to say it. I get that. That's old Kathy Griffin, right? What she said was horrible. And people were like, how dare she? She's terrible. And then, last week they all came to Jamie Allman's defense when he wrote something reprehensible on his Twitter account, right? So there is hypocrisy all over the place, and there's a lot of snowflaking going around. You would agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of snowflakery. Unfortunately, a lot of the snowflakery, we think, culturally is cutting in a certain direction. And a lot of people on the right are saying, well, these are the new rules, so we're gonna play by the new rules. And Trump won because, he fights dirty. And if they're going to punch, we want someone who counterpunches. They're going to bully us. We're going to hire a bully. And we actually, the apocryphal quote by Voltaire that you just used, we get into it in our book briefly, which is, I may detest what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Our fear is that we're losing that mentality in America, where it's no longer, I disagree with you, but I will fight to the death for your ability to say it. And
right.
We're transforming more into, I disagree with you, and therefore I want to make sure that you are destroyed and you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
And, whether it's, look at our debate over guns over the last couple months. There is some thoughtful debate, but a lot of it is just basically, if you disagree with X idea, you want children dead. I mean, that is not a productive conversation.
Well, but on the other side of that is, wait a minute, you want to keep guns out of the hand of mentally ill people. No, wait a minute, you want to take all of our guns. So both sides are guilty, whether or not one is, more than the other. But there's plenty of blame to go around. Guy, I'm out of time. Guy Benson, Mary Katharine Ham, this Wednesday at the Chess Hall of Fame and in the Central West End, brought in by the Show Me Institute, should be entertaining as well as informative. Guy, thanks for coming in. Safe travels.
Sure thing. Are you sure you don't want me to do the weather or something? The time for traffic?
The way I'm driving, who knows? So.